All right, people, welcome back to Bare Bones Talk, where we are going to do our news wrap up and react to a couple of videos about some very bizarre outlier type Trump voters and see what they have to say about virtually anything. um, but yeah, this is our last stream of the 2019 calendar year. So let's take a look at what's been happening. I actually wanted to start with this guy. So apparently, this gentleman you see here, Grafton Thomas, went into a rabbi's house and hacked up five people with a machete. Um, Once again, we're hearing, is this a hate crime? Is it not? It seems to me like it's very obviously a hate crime. But let's take a look at the article. And welcome, Copter. You, once again, are the first person to fall into the trap of what's going to grab people's attention, the title or the giant text on screen. So the market research continues. So let's take a look. Handwritten journals containing anti-Semitic references were found in the home of the man charged with federal hate crimes Monday in the stabbing of five people celebrating Hanukkah at a rabbi's house north of New York City. So at least the feds are saying, yes, this is a hate crime, because the last time that we saw this kind of thing happen where the Jewish-owned store got attacked, they were saying, we're not sure it's a hate crime, but this is obviously a spree of anti-Semitic hate crimes. 5 counts of obstructing the free exercise of religious beliefs by attempting to kill with a dangerous weapon and causing injuries in the Saturday attack. Stabbings on the 7th night of Hanukkah come amidst a bunch of similar attacks. Increased security has been popping up. That's fine, so now you're calling her a girlfriend, Copter? Is that where the status of this stuff is? Because last I knew she was dating the other fella. But I don't know how things have changed there. So let's see. The guy had a lot of journals. Like a lot of bonkers people, he wrote down the ramblings of his kind of off-kilter brain. And he wondered why people mourn for anti-Semitism when there is Semitic genocide. And a page with drawings of a Star of David next to a swastika. A phone recovered from his car included repeated searches for why did Hitler hate the Jews, German Jewish temples near me, and prominent companies founded by Jews in America. So this guy really had the whole anti-Semitic, trifecta of shit going on in his head. Trying to gain information, writing journals of insane shit, and actually attacking people. On the day of the attack, the phone's browser accessed an article called New York City Increases Police Presence in Jewish Neighborhoods After Possible Anti-Semitic Attacks. Here's what to know. So the guy was actually looking into what kind of increased security he was likely to face. His notes are the ramblings of a disturbed individual. But nothing points to an anti-Semitic motive, other than the Stars of David and swastikas. Come on. Or, my impression from speaking with him is he needs serious psychic evaluation. You think? Really? Could it be that somebody who hacks up 5 people at a religious ceremony with a machete needs psychiatric evaluation? Is it possible? Could that maybe be appropriate? Wow, obvious statement is obvious. Thomas's family said he was raised to embrace tolerance, but has a long history of mental illness, including multiple hospitalizations. Okay, so yes, the guy has a mental illness, but the lawyer acting like it's some kind of a surprise that the guy should need a psychiatric evaluation is just bonkers. Oh boy, here we go. He's never spoken about anything like this, said the Reverend Wendy Page, the family's pastor. He's a Christian. The last time I saw him, we prayed together. Really? Well, apparently it didn't help that guy not go hack people up with a machete, so maybe you are not good at your job, Pastor, Page there. Or it's just possible that your religion had nothing to do with whether or not he was going to do this. So maybe you need to stop making excuses for him. The assailant served in the Marines and was a president of his class in Queens. Blah, blah, blah. He played football. Who cares? Like, that's some kind of an excuse. So he heard voices. So he's obviously schizophrenic. In court papers filed in a 2013 eviction case, Thomas said he suffered, from schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety. And his conditions are spontaneous and untamed, which leads us to why is mental health care not available to everybody who goes through this kind of stuff? If this guy had been able to get into therapy and get medications to help him control his schizophrenia, maybe those machete attacks would not have happened. He was arrested within 2 hours of the attack. When police pulled his car over in Manhattan, he had blood all over his clothing and smelled of bleach. Ugh. So obviously trying to get rid of evidence. They recovered the machete with blood on it, the knife with blood and hair on it. Thomas's aunt says the Clorox apparently is from germ phobia, and he would obsessively wash his hands and feet with bleach. Okay. The 757 boss, welcome. Trump's the best POTUS since the Republican POTUS Lincoln. I can see you're obviously very passionate about that. We can get to that subject once we're done with the news roundup, if you like. But be aware that the giant banner across the top here is actually kind of a marketing investigation I'm conducting to see whether people react to giant banners in the thumbnail picture when they're looking at stuff in a particular category, or whether they're more apt to react to the stream title. So if you showed up because you didn't like the giant words on the screen, you're helping me understand what does or does not get people's attention. So the marketing investigation is ongoing. So the aunt also says that the guy grew up in Brooklyn and lived peacefully among Jewish neighbors. She said Thomas had not been taking his medication recently and went missing for a week. So that's an interesting point. So one thing that is unfortunately common among people suffering from schizophrenia is that the medication that you can take helps you feel better, and once you feel better, a lot of people who are in that circumstance think they have been cured and stop taking the medication. So this is somebody who definitely needed help staying on his medication regimen, and the lack of consistent medication undoubtedly contributed to the, running amok with the machete. They're making him look like this monster. My nephew is not a monster, he's just sick, he just needs help. Okay, and I get that you want to see your nephew get help, but oh my god, he just attacked 5 people with a machete. So you need to be aware that not everybody's going to look at this guy and say he's just a poor victim of his mental health, blah, blah, blah. Copter, I have personal experience of what happens when people stop taking meds for mental issues. Yes, I am aware of that. If you want to share for the group here what kinds of problems you've seen that cause, it might be illuminating to hear from somebody other than me and other than this article about it. So by all means, feel free to share and chat. So he went to the house with a scarf over his face, said no one's leaving, whipped out the machete and started stabbing and slashing. Fortunately, none of these 5 people died. They did suffer some pretty significant injuries. One lost a finger, deep cuts. At least one was in critical condition with a skull fracture. Yikes. So he pled not guilty, not surprising, detained on $5 million bail, and refusing to answer questions. All right. This is my favorite part of this whole article. I want you all to look at this. Thomas's criminal history includes an arrest for assaulting a police horse. A police horse. Not the police officer, but the horse. So, yeah. So somebody does not like horses. Oh boy. Alright, so yeah, this guy definitely has mental health issues, definitely needs his medication, wasn't on it, and the public suffered the consequences. Yep, well, hopefully that girl will stay on her medications at this point. So let's move on to one that I know Copter's interested in. I was already aware of this, but he sent me information on it earlier today. That we actually now have an example of a, quote, good guy with a gun stopping a mass shooting in progress. So this firearms instructor was at a church that he attends and is part of the security detail for. And a guy started a shooting spree there, and the guy pulled his weapon and shot the active shooter after he killed two people, unfortunately. But he did put an end to it, so that's a plus. Um, it's horrible that these two people died, but at least there's one incident where, a person, an armed citizen, managed to successfully stop a shooting in progress. So I think we can be glad that he put an end to it, even as we are sad that people died. With Honor CT, welcome. You are also helping me gather marketing data. The big banner across the top of the page that you're seeing is meant to help me figure out whether people respond more to big words on the screen or to the stream title. So you're actually kind of been fished in by a little bit of bait there. So I apologize minorly for that. But I'm trying to get a feel for what Twitch viewers, are drawn to and what they're not. And so far, this is my second attempt at doing a giant banner, and it seems like the giant banners are much more attention-getting than stream titles. I don't know why. I would have. That's actually kind of exactly the opposite of what I would have originally thought. I would have thought people would look at the stream titles to see what stuff is about. But I guess if you have an attention-grabbing banner on the thumbnail, people respond to it. So I'm kind of watching for how people show up for that. Yeah, Copter got fished in by both. The last one just said ban all guns on the top, and of course, people react to it. And of course, it's a useless marketing test if the banner isn't attention-getting. So, don't get me wrong. I actually don't think much of Trump, but I generally would not have a giant banner saying something like this up there other than for market research problems. But yeah, let's take a look at this this good guy with a gun situation here. I have to say, I'm not surprised this happened in Texas, but I'm also not surprised that there is a town in Texas named White Settlement. I mean, only in Texas are you likely to find a town named White Settlement. So, okay. So this guy apparently is a firearms instructor, which is very fortunate for the church that they had somebody with the right skill set to use a firearm under stress. Because apparently he ended the shooting spree with a single shot, which is pretty impressive. Copter is somebody who has a combat-oriented job, like an actual live-fire combat-oriented job. He defends cargo vessels and such from piracy. That's his actual job. And I'm sure he'll appreciate the idea of being able to put a decisive end to something with a single shot and the amount of skill that must have taken on the part of the shooter. So I have to applaud the guy for having trained to the point where he was competent to do his job properly and for acting in a way that did not endanger the rest of the crowd. He didn't accidentally take out a few other parishioners with a blaze of spray and pray fire. So, it's good that the guy was qualified to do what he did. Yeah, Copter, you're right. That guy's marksmanship is good. Pulling a pistol and taking a single shot and finishing it is a pretty impressive thing while the guy is shooting up the church with a shotgun. Because if you read the article, this guy is a newcomer to the church, so he stood out like a sore thumb. But on top of that, he was basically wearing a hat and a fake beard and a giant coat. So he could hardly have been, more conspicuous if he had tried. The guy definitely thought he was being well disguised and wasn't. But as far as I can tell, so far as I have read, the article does not say that, doesn't describe the motive. Because, number one, the guy was shot dead on the scene, so you can't ask him. And the investigation is ongoing. I'm sure they're tearing this guy's living space apart, looking for anything that would give an indication of why he went and shot up a church. But, one of the real tragedies of these active shooter things is you almost never take the guy alive to ask him why they did it, Yeah, the church was loaded with armed people. Which makes me doubly glad that somebody competent put an end to it before a ton of other people pulled their guns, because there's no way to be sure everybody else that was armed in that church was as skilled and trained as the one guy who was a member of the security detail that responded in such a timely fashion. But yeah, so yeah, I'm glad that half a dozen or a dozen other people didn't pull their guns and start opening fire in the middle of a crowded church, because that kind of thing sounds like a recipe for disaster. But one thing that's interesting is the state of Texas, I believe, is the only one who's done this so far. But there is a resolution that was passed there that allow houses of worship to have armed people in them, um, unless the particular house of worship says not to. So they responded to having seen other mass shootings by like literally hiring their own security detail for this church. And it seems like that turned out okay for them. I mean, not great because two people still died other than the shooter. But since the guy pulled a shotgun out from under that coat, the odds are things would have been a lot worse had the security detail guy not been on site. Well, yeah, training does make a difference in your ability to respond under pressure. You know that as well as anybody. You've had to undergo training to help you, be prepared for that. But let's take a look further in there. So yeah, the guy who took out the active shooter is a fellow named Jack Wilson, former reserve deputy officer and a firearms instructor. Um, he does go a little into the cuckoo zone by saying evil exists. I had to take out an active shooter church. I'm thankful to God that I have been blessed with the ability and desire to serve Him. In the but what really matters is he was trained well for the circumstance. It has nothing to do with a blessing or whether or not he wants to go to church. It's a matter of he was there and had the right training to respond in this horrible circumstance. Um, Texas Attorney General says authorities can't prevent mental illness from occurring, and we can't prevent every crazy person from pulling a gun, but we can be prepared like this church was. The attacker was Keith Thomas. I'm not sure I'm saying this guy's last name correctly, but it looks like Kanoonan. His motive is under investigation. Yeah, so with Honor CT, there you go. The motive is still under investigation. We don't know at this point, what drove the guy to do that. So the guy only had a couple of traffic tickets. Apparently, as far as law enforcement was concerned, he was nobody until yesterday. Other law enforcement, though, in other jurisdictions, arrested on charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and theft. So it kind of makes me wonder, how did this guy not have his firearm privileges revoked after that? But I don't know whether his guns were things he was legally entitled to own. But after those kinds of charges, it seems to me like you probably shouldn't be allowed to carry a gun. You've proven yourself to be dangerous to the public. He was also arrested in New Jersey after police found him with a shotgun and rounds wrapped in plastic in the area of an oil refinery. They're not entirely sure yet how that was resolved. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Texas's new state gun laws allow weapons in places of worship unless the house of worship says no. And this church didn't just say yes, they also had their own security detail. This was in response to the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs. You may remember that from 2 years ago. The biggest killing of its kind in Texas history. It doesn't say what his ethnicity is. I'm not sure what his ethnic background matters, though. Is there some reason that's important with Honor CT? Yeah, congregants can be heard screaming. The guy was surrounded pretty quickly by more than a few people, and that goes to what Copter was saying. There were a lot of armed people there. Yeah, the guy did his job, but the important thing is he did his job effectively. You may remember there was an active shooting at a school not too many years ago where there was an actual police officer inside the school, and the guy left without defending the students. He abandoned ship. So it's not just, having the job, it's about, having the training and being willing to put it to use and doing it, and actually trying to save people, not just, being present. I'm not sure what his ethnic background would have to do with that, with honor. Um, but I mean, I suppose it's possible. I would imagine that over the next couple of days, that we're going to see reports from the investigation into this guy that might help turn up what the motive was. But like ethnic background, meaning like, is the person African American? Is the person, Irish American? Whatever. I'm not sure that's going to really be likely to factor into why they shot up that church. Let's see. This article also references the anti-Semitic attack that we just talked about a few minutes ago. Yeah, prior to the shooting, the gunman had drawn the attention of the church's security team because he was acting suspiciously. Um, yeah, they added a security team. Here are the two dead victims. Yada yada yada. Yeah, she says she ran toward her dad, and the last thing she remembers is him asking for oxygen, and she was just holding him, telling him she loved him and he was going to make it, but he died at the hospital. Um, yep. So one of the other security guys was not as quick on the response because apparently one of the other victims was a member of the security detail. With honor, yeah, I'm gonna let that one comment slide, but be careful because you're starting to scoot a little bit toward, like being like sounding racist there. Um, but it would not surprise me if the guy was white. I mean, Texas is a majority white state, so it is probable that the guy uh, was Caucasian. Hampton Bingham, really gonna hide your face because the trolls get to you that much? Hampton, the trolls don't actually get to me. If you take a look beneath the stream screen, you'll see that I have a history of working in this industry. I'm using this because I have, other public facing things that I do. I wanted kind of an interesting theme for this, and I happen to have this program called FaceRig, and I kind of liked the idea of bare bones talk since honestly I'm not much of an artist, and the stream art is going to be very, bad because I'm not that good at this stuff. And so I found this skeleton avatar on it, and I'm using that. But the trolls don't bother me. I've been dealing with trolls for years, and honestly, what's been my experience so far is that the trolls I run into on Twitch are kind of amateur hour compared to the trolls that I used to run into when I wrote for Yahoo News. That kind of stuff. You'd see 3 or 4 thousand comments on a single article, ranging from, you know, screaming about how much they hate me to death threats to, accusing me of doing shall I say, naked things with animals, like whatever. So the trolls that I've run into here have not really been anything that's all that bothersome. And honestly, the fact that I can just ban anybody at the drop of a hat kind of makes it a moot point, because if anybody gets too offensive, I just ban them and move on. The shooter was illegal to own a gun. I don't know yet about that. I'm still reading about this. So, Hampton, do you have some evidence or some citation that the shooter did not have the right to legally own a gun? Because I haven't seen that yet. We're getting further into the article, and we may discover that, but I haven't seen it yet. Not racist, man. The MSM is, though. Again, careful. You're kind of treading close to the line with that. And I will say that the MSM is not to be trusted thing doesn't fly here. It's silly to think that the entire global media is somehow running some conspiracy to lie to everybody, except for like Breitbart, who suddenly is this beacon of truth amidst the rest of whatever. That doesn't hold any water. So we're not going to just bash the MSM that way. The snail looks better. Yes, Copter has seen me use a snail in other circumstances that's like a gamer snail, and it's got like a little sword and a little bag of dice and, whatever else. It's kind of fun. But unfortunately, the snail doesn't really go with the theme of the channel. I saw an article, but I'll go find it. Okay, let us know where you found it, and it'll be interesting. The gunman was killed within 6 seconds of opening fire. That's pretty impressive. FBI is working to determine the shooter's motive. The assailant was relatively transient, but had roots in the area. Appeared to be a loner. Affidavit listed having a wife and living with 4 children. Self-employed in landscaping and irrigation work. So, a work with your hands in the dirt kind of guy. Statement, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, this article doesn't really say anything about whether or not the guy had the legal right to own a weapon. Let me get back to this. So, this is the article I'm looking at here. The shooter got what he deserved. Maybe so. I'd be happier if he had never opened fire in the first place. But I will say I'm glad it didn't extend any further than it did. 2 is certainly better than losing 10. So let's see if we can see the guy in the video. Whoa. Oh, okay. They freeze the video during the violence, so we're not going to see the actual shooter. I think he's over in the background over there, though. That looks like it might be a muzzle flash. But yeah, so it's interesting to see how this one played out. There's been a lot of debate over the past few years about what to do to try to put an end to things like school shootings and church shootings and other mass active shooter events. For those who are new here, you may not be aware, I'm actually a person who has been in, an active shooter circumstance where I had to shelter in place and the whole thing. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's really very frightening. So I have a personal interest in figuring out, how to put an end to that problem or mitigate it or something. I've never really been a fan of having armed guards in every public place, every public school, or whatever, because that starts to look, number one, like the Gestapo are running amok, but also the number of people who can respond properly in a circumstance like that is limited, as evidenced by the fact that the first guy killed there was one of the security detail. So that's somebody who, was present for that purpose, who, according to the article, the security detail knew the guy was suspicious, and yet he was, and the guy was well trained in the whole thing, and still he was the first to die. So having an armed presence is not going to prevent these types of shootings. It's a reactive method of addressing it, not a preventative one. And I'd rather see nobody get shot, If he used an off-the-shelf shotgun, he had 5+1 rounds before he was out, which still means he could have theoretically killed, 4 more people than he actually did. So we're still fortunate that came to an end before he fired any more, Yeah, either way, the point being that, we're kind of fortunate he didn't kill more people than he actually did. But it's still a tragedy no matter how you look at it. And it's also interesting that we're seeing such an upswing in attacks on places people of work, of particular religions are gathered. Between all the anti-Semitic attacks against Jewish people recently, this church shooting, the church shooting 2 years prior that made these guys want to hire a security detail. Yes, the security guys there, according to the article, are all armed and trained regularly with Honor CT. The article doesn't say how many rounds the guy successfully fired. Just that 2 of them were lethal. So it's just disturbing to me. We're seeing so many people act out with their firearms that it's become a national crisis level kind of problem. And I'm constantly frustrated by the fact that some people refuse to allow any real discussion on how to prevent these things. People on the right wing seem only interested in reactive measures like arm everybody, arm the teachers, arm the stupid, the janitors, arm everybody, blah blah blah. Um, so it seems Copter is well, three dead, including the shooter. Um, but the problem with the reactive stuff is people are already dead. What we really need to do is try to suss out the causes for this stuff and mitigate the causes and the circumstances that promote and allow it. And with Honor CT, I understand what you're saying by that, but that may not always be a positive thing. First of all, bad situation is kind of a broad term. A bad situation could be you just unfortunately got a parking ticket. That doesn't really call for a gun. Copter, who I happen to like quite a bit, he's a good guy. Saw a guy checking out a tree on his property with a clipboard and immediately reached for his M4. So, the guy is probably an arborist doing research on local, tree life, and Copter immediately reached for his gun. It's it's been proven that the presence of a gun or any weapon, not just guns, but guns more than most, um, tends to increase the likelihood they will be used or that lethal force will be employed simply because circumstances tend to escalate when weapons are involved in ways they might not when weapons are not present. So there's more than one side to the issue, and unless we're willing to have discussions where all the aspects of this are on the table for serious consideration, we can just look forward to more schools and churches and whatever else getting shot up and a lot of innocent people getting killed. This is the first year, by the way, that the Centers for Disease Control have been allocated money and permitted to actually do research into this as one of the major causes of death in this country, to try to determine what factors really contribute to it from a scientific basis. They've actually been barred from doing that for decades. So I think that we as a nation are starting in some ways to take this a little more seriously than we have in the past. And I hope that that continues because, I don't want to see anybody I know get shot up. I've been in a circumstance where I thought I was going to die because of a circumstance like this. And I can say with 100% certainty I would not have felt better if I had been carrying a gun. Because there was no way for me to adequately employ one on my own behalf in that circumstance, and it simply would have added an element of danger to the place that I was, barricaded in, had I been carrying one. Correct. That's what I mean by reactive stuff with Honor CT. What we need is to look at what causes these things and mitigate the causes so that we don't have as many circumstances where the cops need to show up. Copter, and I've told you this before, and I really hope you'll take it to heart. When you say you refuse to accept any gun control, what that does is it sets you up and other gun enthusiasts and gun owners up to eventually lose all of them, because just like during the beginning of the Trump presidency, the Republicans controlled all three branches of the U.S. government, there will come a day again in the future when the Democrats control all three branches of the United States government. And if people on the right, gun enthusiasts like yourself, have made it clear that they will never, ever, 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 ever give a shit or do anything to try to help with the process of putting an end to the endless slaughter of children, then when the Democrats have the ability to force those things through, they will ramrod it through and you'll end up really not liking the outcome. So it is to your interest. And there's somebody who's going to get banned immediately. But it's to your best interest to well, you're banned. And ban. Well, ban. So yeah, it's frustrating when people like that show up, but it's okay. Anyway, the point being that it's in your best interest to be part of the solution rather than digging your heels in and saying that you're never going to participate in doing anything to try to help put an end to these endless, uh, bits of violence. Um, so with honor, sorry, it took me a minute to respond to you here, but a couple of trolls just showed up and they had to get banned. Um, you say you have a gang problem, not a gun problem, in your opinion. Okay, so one thing that I'm big on here is when people make a claim like that, I ask them, how do you justify it? So, explain how you think that's a problem. Because looking at this, church shooting, the shooter was obviously not a member of a gang. The overwhelming number of mass shootings in schools and churches and such have zero whatsoever to do with gangs. So, there, you can't say that this is a gang problem but not a gun problem. There's obviously a lot more going on here than gangs. And Copter, that may be the case. I don't have the stats up in front of me right now, but let's assume that it is. Um, okay. Number one, that doesn't mean that no other causes of gun deaths exist. And number two, it doesn't mean that we should not be actively trying to find solutions to all of these issues in order to save lives. Does that make sense? Do you understand where I'm coming from with that? Also, by the way, with honor, I appreciate that you're being, a decent conversationalist here, unlike those two less pleasant people that just showed up. Yeah, no, that's why I'm saying I agree that that's very likely because I believe you showed some stats that back that up. But again, those are not the only causes of gun-related death. And regardless of how many causes there are, it seems pretty apparent that we should try to address them. Not just one of them, that's related to gangs. So there's more to address there than just one cause. So wow, those two guys were sure salty when they showed up, huh? You can't stop a crazy person with laws. LOL and no problem. Um, Actually, you kind of can with honor. And by that I mean if we were to change the laws in this country so that mental health care and medication were actually available to people who have mental health issues, you'd put a stop to a whole lot of problems. So one of the problems we do have in this country is that the legal system we have right now does not accommodate getting the people who need mental health care the care that they need. So what we actually have right now is laws that actually, you know, exacerbate the problem of what you're calling crazy people. It leaves them without care. It leaves them without, adequate access to treatment, medication, whatever else they're going to need to get their lives under control. And again, Copter, doesn't matter what the percentage is, as long as there is a significant number of injuries and deaths related to whatever the subject matter we're talking about, it bears looking into, it bears examining. So, yeah, you probably start with whatever the biggest causes are, and you work your way down the chart. But there are some factors that contribute to all gun related deaths, right? One of which is the incredibly large volume of guns in circulation in this country. And I don't have a solution to that problem on hand, ready to go. But it does contribute to it. The availability of firearms is a necessity for firearm related death. So the question then becomes, how do we find a balance between protecting the lives of people who would be injured or killed or would end their own lives because of suicide, etc., with the legal desire of people to do things like hunt or target shoot or whatever. Like, how do we strike a balance? Because right now, we're not even trying to strike a balance. We're just saying, well, sucks to be those people who died, and then moving on with our day. Antidepressants are an issue, it seems. I took them before. It made me feel no emotions. Um, with honor, antidepressants are a broad range of medications, and when you get to people who are like things like schizophrenic, then you're delving into antipsychotics and anti-hallucinogenics and a whole bunch of other things. But if you had problems with an antidepressant, you were probably on the wrong antidepressant, and your doctor should have been working with you to find the right medication for your particular biochemistry that would get you the positive results you need with a minimum of negatives or no negatives. It's not like there's just one kind of antidepressant. There's an incredibly large number of them, and one of the things physicians are supposed to do is try to tailor their use to the individual patient. Copter says, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should ignore the issue, but forcibly taking firearms from legal owners isn't the solution. I'm inclined to agree that forcibly taking firearms from owners is not the solution. I am inclined to think that we should start with things like a requirement for universal background checks, which might have kept a firearm out of the hands of this guy who had previous convictions for, violent assault, or the guy who, in the other article, who attacked a police horse. I mean, like, what the hell? If you go and like beat up a horse, you probably have demonstrated that you are too violent for personal firearms ownership. Like attacking a police horse is just like over the hill bonkers. But I think the background checks would be a great place to start. I think that requiring firearms owners to store their firearms securely and safely would be, a good place to go. I don't see how anybody could reasonably object to being required to store your firearms safely. I cannot fathom why anybody would object to that. Whatever the cops have, I want. Okay, so with Honor CT, that's never going to happen. Nor should it happen. Because when you have an attitude like that, what that causes is essentially an arms race between civilians and police officers, because the police will very justifiably argue that they are facing weaponry they can't cope with, and then the government will arm them more heavily, which will lead to more deaths when police weapons fire through walls and kill unintended people, etc. And then the civilians like you will demand to have the same weapons, and then the police will demand to have something to combat those, and you end up with an arms race with no end to it, and everybody losing because the destructive potential floating around out there keeps going up and up and up and up. Copter says, my guns makes the stuff the local police has look like toys. Yes, but you work for a private security firm that gives you access to things that most people don't have. I mean, most people don't get to have grenade launchers, as personal weapons. But your company provides stuff like that and more, when it's necessary for the job, and even sometimes when it's not. But I mean, let's ask you guys here. Do you agree that taking some reasonable steps that might reduce the number of dead kids is a good idea? Are we on the same page with that? Because if you genuinely don't care how many kids die on the wrong end of a gun, then there's really no discussion to be had here. Because any discussion sort of hinges on the idea that we all agree that dead children are a bad thing. Yes. Copter has this goof, this like running joke where he talks about like nuclear radioactive squid launchers and stuff. But yeah, the question I asked is actually an important one. So, do we agree that having lots and lots and lots of dead kids on the wrong end of guns is not good? So before the conversation can proceed, we need to have that question answered. I care, but I honestly don't think more regulations would help. Now, that's an interesting point, because I happen to agree with you in a very unusual way. which is that one of the obstacles we have to improving the gun safety level in this country is that every state and municipality has the ability to create its own completely unrelated to any other region's set of gun laws. If we have, and that leads to things like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term straw purchasing, but I live in a state where it's very easy to get a gun, and straw purchasing is when somebody who is a citizen of a state like mine goes to the gun store, buys a lot of guns, and then takes them somewhere else where it's harder to get guns and sells them at a markup to make money, thereby getting guns to people who wouldn't ordinarily be able to have them. It's called straw purchasing. And that only works because there are delineations regionally where the gun laws vary. So we have a lot of gun laws on the books nationally from town to town, state to state, etc. I am in favor of having a sensible, unified, national set of laws so that it would immediately put an end to the whole straw purchasing problem, because that's one of the major pipelines through which guns get into the hands of the criminal element. And Copter, yes, there is no easy solution to this, but that doesn't mean that we should not seek a solution. It doesn't mean that we should not put in the effort, and it doesn't mean that some improvement is so worthless that you shouldn't pursue it. Like any improvement, if it means fewer dead kids, is probably worth the effort. Right? And just so you know, with Honor CT, I've done quite a bit of shooting in my lifetime. I don't have this abject hatred of guns. I'm not terrified of them, anything like that. Um, what I am terrified of is finding out that, like, my niece or nephew has been killed in their school. That terrifies me. Um, we can't just ignore the issue. Yes, I'm glad to hear you say that, Copter. So maybe I should do another show about that at some point where we can have folks bring their best ideas to the table and, kind of hash through them a little and see what people have to say. What ideas might work, what ideas might not, what's good or bad about different ones. Try and have everybody walk away from it with a little more information than when they started. So maybe that'll be a subject of an upcoming show. I've done broadcasts on the gun issue before, but it's always interesting to get new people's perspectives if you're planning on coming back with Honor CT. I like to think that as lefties go, I'm a fairly approachable one. you know, at least I hope I am. By the way, whenever you see my avatar freeze, it's because I'm taking a sip of my drink, and the face tracking software doesn't work on a cup. There's nothing inherently wrong with you enjoying your gun use, your marksmanship, whatever it is that you use them for. I do think that, like, grabbing your M4 when that guy was checking out a tree nearby might have been a bit of an overreaction on your part. But liking your guns is not a sin. It's not a crime. It's not an evil or a bad thing about you as a person. What bothers me is when somebody likes their guns more than they like saving the lives of kids. And I have actually talked to people who've said that to me. That they think that all these dead kids are just the price of being able to have guns. And I thought that's a horrific worldview. Even then, your love for your guns is nothing compared to the love you have for your girlfriend and her daughter. Well, that's very reasonable of you. I mean, I would like to think that a rational human being would care more for the people in their lives than for the objects in their lives, regardless of what the object is. Be it a gun or a car that you like owning, or, your computer, or, whatever it is. Well, you were trying to make your place safer in case you were going to have a minor staying there with you. That's very reasonable. And you and I have talked about the idea of storing guns safely in the past. So yeah, with Honor CT, and do you have anything else to? Oh, there you are. Okay, why do we have armed guards in our banks but not schools? Um, that is simple and horrifying, actually, and that is societally we place more value on wealth than we do on people. That's it in a nutshell. For example, if you take a look, the crime or the punishments you get for robbing a bank are enormously higher than the punishments you get typically for things like raping somebody. Um, it's actually frightening when the crime is against a financial institution. The punishments tend to be inordinately severe, and financial institutions defend their riches, with lethal force if necessary. But in this day and age, most bank branches you'll run into don't have an armed guard in it. They're trained to just hand over the money and let the police handle it later. I agree with you. If we could have some type of government subsidy to make it less expensive to purchase, a gun storage lockers and such, I think more people would use them. Honestly, I think that price is an obstacle for a lot of people. Although I do have to say there is a bit of irony in that if you have the money to buy the gun, you should probably have the money to buy a way to store it. I know people with huge collections of guns that have no safe storage methods whatsoever. Not even like trigger locks on their weapons. Well, with Honor CT, we can have a whole lot of discussions about the problems with this country. I'm assuming you're a U.S. citizen. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have shown up for the banner the way you did. Um, but this country has huge problems with the way its economy is structured. And I'm going to do more shows about that in the future because I think it's important. What I have expertise in that, and one thing I have discovered is most people in the United States have absolutely no solid grasp of how the economy functions, how banking works, how financial transactions are structured, what investments do, what they don't do. Like most people just never get taught this stuff. And it's not their fault that their schools don't teach it, but it's important stuff. And if you don't know these things, it renders you vulnerable to being taken advantage of by people who do know these things. You see what I'm saying? Um, in some cases, a person has left a firearm from a family member passing. That's true. I happen to have a firearm in the house locked up in a safe that is a firearm passed down from my wife's father to be in our care. So I understand that firearms are often given as a bequest from one family member to another, from one generation to another. Heirloom things don't have to be silverware. There are a lot more things in this world that people pass down than just the clock that Grandpa made with his bare hands. So, shall we continue this, or do you want to move on to another topic? Because I have a lot of stuff we can cover tonight. A lot of stuff. Some of it might piss one or two of you off. But you'd like to see this firearm at some point? It's a Ruger 22 caliber revolver that he had. It was actually manufactured the year I was born, coincidentally. It kind of in the cowboy style of handle. I forget what the model of it is off the top of my head. But it's a fairly pleasant little 22 single action. And thankfully because it's fires 22 long rifle, it's dirt cheap to shoot if that ever becomes something I want to do. I had it professionally restored by a gunsmith, actually. And since then, it's been kept oiled clean and stored away, so there hasn't been any use of it. I don't even have to clean the barrel out because it hasn't been fired since I had it back from the gunsmith. But yes, when it was put into my care, I made sure that it was properly restored and maintained, and that it's stored safely and all that. What were you expecting me to say? I leave it in a bucket of acid just to see what happens? That's exactly the way that it's stored, Copter. Oiled properly to keep it safe for a long time. Okay, so um, we've kind of beaten the gun issue to death, pardon the expression, for the evening. So let's move on to other stuff here. Big piece of news that is not getting much real airtime right now is the recently unearthed Afghanistan papers. Have you guys heard about this yet? Let me know. If you haven't heard about it, you definitely should, and I would suggest that you do a bunch of research into it after the stream because it's like nationally important kind of stuff. Well, I don't hear anybody piping up yet, so I'm going to assume you haven't heard too much about this yet. Essentially, the papers, the Afghanistan papers, have just been gotten from the U.S. government, and they go back to the Bush administration. And what it basically amounts to is there is a mountain of data and evidence and documentation that says that after we got into Afghanistan in 2001, it became completely apparent to the Bush administration and the entire military command that that war could never, ever, ever, ever be won. And they started a concerted and deliberate plan of lying to the United States public about the successes that we've been having in Afghanistan for the past 18 years. And it continued through the Bush administration, through the entire Obama administration, and through the Trump administration. They've all been lying about the fact that we are losing. We are losing and losing and losing, and we're just losing people left and right. We've lost like 2,400 people so far, and there is no way we will ever win that conflict, ever. And none of them have had the wherewithal to say this is a losing proposition. We're ending this. Um, when you say they, that's a very broad term with Honor CT. Um, and now we're starting to get back into the whole let's not just blanket say the MSM here. But if you want to talk about who absolutely has made money off of the fact that we're in unending conflict, it would be the military contractors who supply aircraft and tanks and trucks and bullets and whatever else. They do amount to war profiteers. That is very true. But when you say you don't trust the government, there is a lot about the government that is untrustworthy, to be sure. But we've seen, because this is an 18-year-long process, that it goes beyond party affiliation. It's the entire, federal government has been engaged in this disinformation campaign while American servicemen and women die over there in large numbers for almost 2 decades. In 2 years, or a year and a half at this point, it'll be 20 years in Afghanistan. And that's been through 2 Republican administrations and 1 8-year Democrat administration, and everybody just stuck with the lie. So I would say you should probably do some reading up on the Afghanistan papers after you're done watching the stream tonight, because there's a lot to unpack, and I don't even have nearly enough time to cover it in depth on this show when we've already been at this for a while and been doing other topics. But I highly recommend that you look into it. Um, So, yeah, basically the entire federal government knows about this. Um, the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction has been telling them you can't win, you can't win, you can't win, and they've been ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it. Yes, the defense contractors absolutely have made a ton of money off of this. Um, so let's see. So not only are they saying that it can't be won, but the report revealed waste, abuse, questionable judgment. Um, I mean, it's an overall clusterfuck that we haven't seen since Vietnam. It's literally like Vietnam Part 2, only longer. This is the longest military conflict the United States has ever engaged in. So it's just crazy. Um, WikiLeaks has exposed a lot of stuff, but there's mountains of new stuff that's actually right from the federal government that even WikiLeaks didn't have. Like I say, it's worth your time to Google the Afghanistan papers and take a look at it. The Washington Post actually did the first expose on it just a day or two ago, I think. And it's just a huge, huge, it's unreal. We haven't seen a concerted effort like this to just lie to the American public for almost 2 decades about a war that we're losing, like ever. This is just a whole other level of crazy. So, yeah. The MSM. When you say the MSM, I want you to be more specific because one thing that we've got going on in this country that's very damaging is this weird distrust of the media, which I have to say is one of the reasons why I'm not a Trump fan. I mean, I've got a lot of reasons to not be a Trump fan, but that's one of them, is that he has started this whole bullshit rhetoric about fake news, fake news, fake news, um, trying to get the American people to distrust the media. And there was actually an interview he did before his nomination was confirmed, where he was talking to a reporter, and the reporter asked him point blank why he always publicly takes a shit on the media, and he responded with unusual candor. He said, "I do it just to discredit you, so that when you guys have bad things to say about me, nobody will believe you." Okay, so if you think cable news is dying, you're wrong. Major news agencies are not going anywhere. Um, but if I were you, I would not get any information whatsoever from Fox because they're the organization that sued to repeal the Fairness Doctrine, literally taking the United States to court specifically to get permission to lie on the news. So that is entirely on Fox. We used to have a thing in this country called the Fairness Doctrine where any news organization was required to be honest on the air, and Fox wanted to lie. There's a whole like 25 or 30 or 40 year history of the right wing's media strategy, um, and it involved being able to sell the American public lies and propaganda. But in order to do that, they needed to overturn the Fairness Doctrine, so they used Fox News as their vehicle to do that. And Fox News has been lying through its teeth ever since. So I would not trust them whatsoever. But you can look at a lot of different media sources, and there are plenty of conservative media sources that are a lot more reliable than Fox News if you want to look to them. What you will find is that most media outlets have a political slant to where they fall on the political spectrum, but the level of factual reporting that you'll find in major news networks is enormously better on behalf of all of them than it is from Fox News. So just be very wary of anything you hear from Fox. Any company that literally sues the American government to get permission to lie to you should not be trusted. Ever. And you have to keep in mind that if you ignore the mainstream media, the only sources of information you're going to have are going to be like crackpot blogs and such like that. One of the reasons why, if you take a look, when I start the night, I'm looking at this particular website, which is the Associated Press, is that the Associated Press and Reuters are what are called wire services. They are usually the first people to report on anything, and they are not known for being biased in any way. They are about the most neutral and factual reporting sources you can find. So if you want to get accurate and honest reporting, go to the Associated Press or Reuters, because those are the sources from which everybody else gets their information, and then they send their own reporters out and slant the stuff. But the stuff you get from AP and Reuters is pretty much as, as on the spot as you're ever going to find. So one of the things I wanted to touch on tonight, though, in addition to letting people know about the Afghanistan papers, was I have always been absolutely driven bonkers by the fact that anybody voted for Donald Trump. And the reason why I'm always so bonkers about that is because the guy is one of the worst human beings I have ever, known to exist in the world. And having grown up in the area where he lived for most of his adult life, I've been, there near and in New York for the shit he's been pulling since the 1970s. Okay, I'm kind of old. I don't know what your ages are, but the fact of the matter is Trump is a piece of human garbage. But people voted for him, and they've had their own reasons for it. But when you actually get Trump voters to talk about what they think, a lot of the time it's completely fucking bonkers. And I have yet to be able to find somebody who is a Trump voter who has given me a reason why they voted Trump that wasn't just absolutely cuckoo. And I was going to show a couple of videos. I mean, some of them are intentionally designed to be humorous, but they do paint. Okay, so here's the thing you got to keep in mind. America didn't love Trump. America loved the personality Trump projected through his reality TV shows and such. But the guy's been a known criminal since, again, the 1970s. The reason why, by the way, he lost in New York is because the people in New York have actually known what the guy is really like. It's almost unheard of for a presidential candidate to lose their own home city. Okay? And that's because Trump is a piece of shit. He has been racist since the 70s. He's denied people of color the ability to rent from him. Like, he intentionally says he will not let black people live in his properties. He has engaged in pedophiliac sexual conduct when he owned that pageant, like the Teen USA, I think it was called, or Teen America. He would intentionally use the fact that he owned the thing to let him get into the girls' dressing room while they were mostly naked so he could ogle these minors. He has cheated on every wife he's ever had. He has brought, Melania and her family, he talks about chain immigration. Their whole family was brought in by chain immigration. He has defrauded people with a fake university. He's defrauded people with fake charities. The guy is a criminal in every imaginable aspect. And on top of everything, he's also a dick to his own supporters. I mean, this is a guy who said he could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue in New York and his supporters wouldn't abandon him. And his supporters ate it up. They thought that was just brilliant. But what he just did was he said, hey, supporters, you're so fucking dumb that even if I committed murder in public, you're too stupid to turn your back on me. And then his supporters proved that he was correct to call them that stupid because he insulted them to their faces and they still didn't turn their backs on him. It's this weird, like, cult of personality kind of thing going on with no, there's no policy they can point to that Trump has provided that's made the country better. There's no act he has undertaken that has improved the United States. He has not improved our position in the world. I mean, he's done everything horribly wrong, and the people who like him still like him. And I wanted to show this one video. Where is it? Is this it? No. Here we go. Here's one. So let's see if I can get this to play. Why is this all silent? Skip it. Okay, here we go.
Earlier this week, Donald Trump proposed a bold new program to manage immigration into the United States.
We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. I call it extreme vetting.
Okay, so do you remember this thing, the whole extreme vetting thing, where he was not going to allow anybody in the country until they passed this really extreme test of how well they know and agree with our laws and culture and such? Do you remember that? Because this was one of his big things that his supporters loved. It was going to be, oh, we're going to keep out all the bad people. No major wars again. He's just as guilty of participating in the Afghanistan debacle as everybody else. Peace talks with North Korea. You have to also keep in mind that until Trump did it, every Republican commentator, every Republican politician took a massive shit on Obama for doing exactly the same thing. He actually engaged in peace talks with North Korea years before Trump attempted it, and the right wing took a massive dump on him, saying America should never talk to dictators. So either we should not talk to dictators, in which case, yes, you can say Obama was wrong, but you also have to tell Trump to go fuck himself. Or you can say that peace talks are a good thing, in which case you have to give credit for Obama for doing it years ahead of anything Trump did. So there's no winning that one for conservatives. But Trump isn't getting into peace talks with the North Koreans at all. He has not suggested, and because just so you know, the Korean War technically is still underway. We have a ceasefire with North Korea, but we never actually ended the war. He has made no proposal for doing that. He talks about the North Korean dictator as if being a dictator is a good thing. So you're not going to win any points by pointing to North Korea as a Trump victory. Black and Hispanic unemployment at all-time low. If you do any research into that, you will discover that is A, false, and B, misleading, because the jobs that are being created in this country now are absolute shit. You have to keep in mind that so we have to actually delve a little deeper in order to understand why that's a total bullshit item here. But it comes down to another topic, which is people on the right love to essentially suck the dick of anybody who says they're a job creator, okay? And that is a stupid, stupid thing to do, because just the act of creating a job is meaningless, okay? Slave owners created jobs for people from Africa. That didn't mean it was good to have one of those jobs. In order for it to be a good thing for you to have a job, in order for a job to be worthwhile, it has to pay you enough money that it's actually valuable to you to undertake it, that you have a fair living wage coming to you. And the jobs that have been created under the Trump administration have mainly been shit minimum wage jobs. Meanwhile, automation has exported a ton of the higher paying jobs out of the country under Trump's administration. So yes, they did. Slaves had a job. They had a shitload of work to do. Okay? They had an absolute ton of work to do. It just wasn't voluntary, but they had jobs. Oh yeah, they did. Okay? But even if you don't want to use the slave example, sweatshops. If you don't like the idea of little kids being forced to work for a penny a day, same problem. Okay? When the job you have created is they got paid food and lodging and lots of beatings and, the rape of their wives and daughters is what they got paid. But again, if you can understand why sweatshop labor is bad, then you can just let the objections go, and you can just admit that you know what the problem is here. Okay, so just creating a job is meaningless. Creating jobs that are actually worth having, where a person can survive on it and support a reasonable lifestyle on it. It's not just China where we have sweatshops. Sweatshops exist all over the world. And technically, anybody working in the United States for minimum wage is essentially a sweatshop worker, because you cannot survive solely on a minimum wage job. There is no state in this country with a minimum wage high enough for you to survive on that wage. So all of it's sweatshop labor. It's just a matter of how bad the sweatshop is. There's definitely something advantageous to having, an $8 an hour job in the United States compared to an $8 a month job in a hoodie factory in some Far Eastern, garbage bin building. But that doesn't mean the jobs we have here are not bad jobs. So when you talk about the unemployment rate for what you're saying is black and Hispanic unemployment, they've just been offered shit jobs that they have to take, because the alternative is starvation and homelessness and death for their kids who can't get medication they need or whatever. And you have like 20 people living in one house just so that they can survive long enough to get rent. And thank you for the follow. I do appreciate all follows. But the point being, just being a job creator is meaningless if the jobs you are creating are not living wage jobs. Okay, and this goes back to way before we had an economic system like the one we had now. So if you imagine that we're living 1,000 years ago when people survived by building a ramshackle log cabin and, plowing a field next to their house and raising their own food and livestock and whatever, people got by on their own, and if you wanted your neighbor to help you out with something, you had to pay them an amount of money that made it worth their time to stop doing whatever else they were doing that actually took care of them and allowed them to survive and prosper. That's living wage. That's a fair trade of your very limited time on this planet for some kind of compensation. The economy we have now, people are asked to trade that valuable time, because we only get so much of it before we're 6 feet under, for amounts of money that will not support them for the amount of time that they're putting in exchange for their labor. So again, when people say, oh, they're a job creator, or oh, unemployment is down, it's meaningless if the jobs are not worthwhile jobs. And at this point in time, the jobs that have been created under the Trump administration, and you can look all this up on the Department of Labor website. You don't have to take my word for it. You can see the job statistics there. They are almost entirely minimum wage jobs, whereas the higher paying jobs that exist in this country are being offshored at an alarming rate under the Trump administration. So you can't win that one either. If you want to talk about the stuff that Trump has done, those are losing arguments to make. But do you remember, we're trying to getting off track here. Do you remember this bit about extreme vetting where Trump was saying we're not going to let anybody in unless they meet these criteria? Like that we're above and beyond the ways that immigrants are normally screened and tested? Because this was a thing. He loved talking about extreme vetting. He loved it. So let's look at this a little more.
I call it extreme vetting.
It's like he really thinks the more extremes he puts on it, the more votes he'll get, We're down 6 points in Ohio, so extreme vetting, extreme. Check again. How many? 7. Extreme.
And while Trevor Noah may be exaggerating this a bit, Trump is known for being very repetitive in his rhetoric.
Well, we sent Jordan Klepper to find out.
But this is the funny
Donald
part
Trump's
here.
new ideological screening test will weed out extremists with
Extreme views about religion, such as its oppression of women, gays, and non-believers.
That's right, Trump wants prospective Americans to embrace religious freedom, gender equality, and gay rights. At a recent rally in Wisconsin, his fans were on board.
I am for extreme vetting. I am.
I think it is a good idea.
Extreme vetting. Think that's a good idea?
Of course, he forgot one thing, just make them eat some bacon.
These guys were pumped about...
So there you go. The first thing you have here is a Trump voter saying make immigrants eat bacon, which is basically saying he hates anybody who's a Muslim because Muslims cannot eat bacon, and he hates anybody who's a kosher practicing Jew because Jews who practice the kosher rules cannot eat bacon. But let's go, because this gets even better. And this kind of thing you'll see is what frustrates me about Trump voters. Is there are a lot of people a lot like the people you're about to see in this video.
America's values of tolerance, so I knew they'd pass Trump's test with flying colors. Fill in the blank for me. 2 men getting married is blank.
Disgusting.
Actually, the answer is legal in the United States.
Okay, so you say you hate Islam but not Muslims. I'm not sure how you can separate the two, because the reason a human being is a Muslim is because they practice Islam. You can't really just say you hate Islam but not Muslims the way you're talking about it there. You could say you hate Islam but not people from Afghanistan, for example, but you can't just say you hate Islam but not Muslims. That's like saying you hate Christianity but not Christians. It doesn't work that way. No, but the thing is, Muslims, by definition, are the people who practice those ideas. You cannot separate Islam from Muslims. All Muslims practice Islam. That is why we call them Muslims. You know, and just so you know, I'm an atheist. I think the Islamic system of religion has a lot of horrific stuff in it. I can't say I hate it, but I do hate certain aspects of it. You know, I hate the idea that people use it to justify things like suicide bombing. But you can clearly distinguish between people who are suicide bombers and the Muslim population in general. You know, the two are not synonymous. So be cautious about how you generalize, because that can lead to some really bad conclusions. But so we have this guy in the video here, this white-haired gentleman who apparently hates gay people, and the idea of gay marriage he finds disgusting. And when these people are being given the tests questions that are on Trump's extreme vetting questionnaire, and they are failing miserably. So let's continue with this.
It's legal, but I don't like it.
It's legal, but I don't like it. Well, you know what? You don't have to like it, but you can't be a dick about it because it's legal. You're not allowed to be a bigot, dude. It's part of the law. Let's go on.
It's important to believe in, to have respect for everyone's religion.
Okay, so here we go. This is one where this Trump voter proves that some of these people are total idiots. So here we go. It says it's important to have respect for everyone's religion. So that's the claim. How do they follow it up? Let's see.
So you respect Christianity?
I do.
Judaism?
Yes.
Islam?
No.
So apparently, it doesn't matter, because these are very common beliefs among the Trump voting public. This woman just said it's important to respect all religions, and then the guy says Christianity. She goes, yeah. Judaism, yeah. Islam, no. So apparently, no, she does not respect all religions and does not think that that's the goal.
A woman be president?
The presidency is a man's job.
The presidency is a man's job, says this one.
Women are qualified to be president.
No. A female has more hormones. She could start a war in 10 seconds. If she has hot flashes, whatever, boom.
Haven't all wars been started by men?
Yes.
So, I mean, look at this stuff. The presidency should be a man's job. That's obviously this woman saying she doesn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton because she is a woman. But, he says, oh, well, a woman is more likely to start a war because of hormones. And then you have, she's confronted with the fact that essentially wars are almost universally started by men, and she doesn't even realize there's a problem. But this gets even better. You're going to see some really insane shit in just a minute.
Do you think a gay couple should have the same rights as
No, I don't. I really don't. I don't think it's fair.
to the gay couple?
Well, no, but the regular couple, they work so hard, and the gay couple, they want more.
When you say more, do you mean equal?
Yeah, they want equal in that.
And that's just too much.
Yeah.
So, again, this person thinks that gay people wanting equal rights somehow means they want more than what heterosexual people get. And literally doesn't even understand she just said something stupid. She has no idea.
No, that's the wrong answer. Sorry, hold on. Turns out Trump's ideology test was going to be harder than I thought.
Whenever I hear president, I think of man. It's a man's job. What sort of, I may be...
Close-minded.
No, yeah, well, no.
Misogynistic?
No,
You're voting against your own interests.
that's it. Thank you very much.
Amazing. This woman just agreed she's voting against her own best interests and still doesn't understand how dumb that is.
These extreme nations, they don't treat women with respect.
We treat women with respect here.
Yes, we do.
That's an American ideal.
Yeah.
Tell me about your shirt. What's it say?
It says, Hillary sucks. But not like Monica.
So apparently this guy says, here in America we treat women with respect, while wearing a t-shirt that shits on Hillary Clinton and makes a blowjob joke about Monica Lewinsky. But this guy gets even better when you see the back of his shirt.
Hilarious. So we were talking about treating women with respect.
It's an American ideal that we treat women with respect.
You got to give me the back of that shirt one more time. That's too much fun.
Trump that bitch.
We don't even see the irony in it. I love it.
Keep in mind, this is a guy who just went on a tirade about how treating women with respect is an American ideal.
Right? As passionate as these guys were, they just weren't passing Trump's ideological test. Luckily, there was still time to study.
Okay, so the rest of this is just kind of goofing on these people by asking them to, like, watch TV shows with gay characters and such. But this is a very common thing. Every Trump voter that I talk to says stuff maybe not quite as stupidly as these people have expressed it, but stupid nonetheless. I mean, they tend to be badly informed, flat out wrong about a lot of stuff, unaware that they're wrong about a lot of stuff, unwilling to accept that they're wrong about a lot of stuff, and so committed to Trump that they will never change their vote no matter how wrong they are, no matter how bad Trump gets, no matter what Trump does. You know? So, I mean, you say you're not like these people. Okay. Well, you just said that you dislike Islam, but without realizing that you're not able to separate that from Muslims as a population because it is the literally defining characteristic of Muslims, right? You know, how do you feel about Muslims immigrating to the United States? Let's see how you fare when asked about these issues. You know, because it's been the case for the majority of Trump voters I've talked to that they're not really big fans of Muslims coming to the U.S. I'm very curious to see what you have to say, because I really want to think that you are being sincere when you say you're not like these people, because I would really like to think there are Trump voters out there that are not like the people in this video. Anyone is welcome here, they just have to come here legally. Okay, so what do you think about the fact that Trump has made it virtually impossible to come here legally? And while you're thinking about that one, what do you think about the idea of a border wall? Let's take a look at that one. Either there's a heck of a delay on the stream or you're writing quite a bit, and I'm going to be very interested to see it. I asked how you said anyone is welcome here, and I responded with two questions. The first of which is, how do you feel then about the fact that Trump has made it virtually impossible for anybody to immigrate here legally? And what do you think about the border wall idea? While you're pondering that, one of the things that I was saying earlier is that a lot of Trump voters are so committed they don't care what he does and they'll stay a Trump voter. And that is where this video comes in. So I'm going to play that while we're waiting on it.
Embellished his relationship with Ronald Reagan. His supporters don't care. They're passionate to the point where it seems like Donald Trump could say anything and they would stick with him. And to test this hypothesis, we went out in the street and we asked people who said they're on Team Trump, what would Donald Trump have to do to lose your vote? And this is what they said.
You're probably going to find this staggering when you see what these people's responses to that question are. I hope you find it staggering, honestly.
What would it take for Trump to lose your vote?
Nothing. There's nothing he could do to lose my vote.
What do you have to do to lose my vote? Be a socialist like Bernie or be a criminal like Hillary?
So, be a socialist like Bernie or a criminal like Hillary. That's one, I hear those two things. First of all, if you want to talk about what socialism is, most Americans have no idea what socialism actually is. And secondly, if you want to talk about who's a criminal, the criminal activities engaged in by Trump are so far beyond anything you could ever demonstrate Clinton as having even begun to approach. He is vastly more criminal than she is. So this guy does not know what he's talking about socialism, because we already have socialism here in this country. And secondly, he has no idea what he's talking about criminality, because he doesn't seem to understand that Trump is a known convicted criminal who has defrauded people of hundreds of millions of dollars and is racist against black people. Let's say you say, I like the wall. In Hillary's emails from WikiLeaks, she supports a wall but never admits. Perhaps so, but a wall is a stupid idea regardless, and the reason for it is, well, there's a couple. The first one of which is it's ruinously expensive to even attempt to build a wall like the one he's talking about. And secondly, it's entirely ineffective to build a wall like that because it will not do anything to stop illegal immigration. For a couple of reasons, the first one of which is the overwhelming majority of illegal immigration that comes into this country comes in through the Canadian border or through our airports and seaports. It does not mostly come in through people running across the border into Texas. That's not where most illegal immigration comes from. Secondly, a wall will not work because all it takes to defeat a 30-foot wall is a 31-foot high ladder, and you can find videos all over the internet of people defeating Trump's test wall segment with nothing but a piece of rope and a rock. You know, they tie a rock to the end of the rope, they throw it over the end, and they just climb the friggin' rope from one side to the other. It is useless. There's a reason we don't build castles anymore. It's because walls are shit by today's standard. They don't do anything useful, for anything related to national defense or border protection. It's a useless idea, and it would cost a shit ton of money, and it would involve using the eminent domain rules to take the land from a bunch of legal landowners who happen to own the land that borders Mexico. So there's literally nothing good about the border wall idea. It's too expensive to be of any real use. It doesn't prevent any immigration from anybody who can get their hands on a piece of rope and a rock. And even if it did stop immigration from the southern border, it would only stop that, and it would not do anything for the overwhelming majority of immigration that comes in through other directions. So I hope you will reconsider your interest in that wall, because it will not do anything like what you may think it would do. It's not going to help with the immigration problem in any way. Most people won't travel through desert with a ladder. So think about what you just said. What you just basically said is people are willing to run across a desert to get into the United States for the hope of a better life, but if they gotta carry a rope with them, they're just not gonna do it. I mean, do you understand that doesn't make sense when you hear it said back to you? Okay, you're not going to stop illegal immigration through that border with a rope or with a wall. It's just not going to stop it. Your neighbor's illegal. He told me what he went through. Yeah, it's a horrific process to try to get to the States. But you're not going to put an end to the illegal border crossings with a wall. I mean, you can already read many, many stories over decades of, the Border Patrol people finding tunnel networks that have existed for years that people use to smuggle drugs from Mexico into the United States. They just go under or around or through or over the walls. It means nothing in terms of stopping the flow of anything illegal from one country to another. It just doesn't mean anything. Vist, I would tend to agree that ICE has shown some very racist tendencies. You can find a Facebook group that the majority of ICE enforcement agents are a member of, and they toss racist stuff around there all the time. So that's a very unfortunate reality. With honor, let's assume for the sake of argument that when you say it'll lower the numbers that you're correct. The amount of numbers it will reduce is negligible once people figure out how to circumvent the wall with a rope and a rock. And again, if you really want to put a dent in the problem with people coming to the United States illegally, why would you spend all these hundreds of billions of dollars building a wall that will affect almost none of it, instead of actually trying to do something to improve prevention where the majority of people do come into the United States? You know, where most illegals do get into this country. Because if your goal is to try to reduce illegal immigration, doesn't it seem like it would make sense to you to actually expend your time and energy and money where it's mostly happening? You know, because the wall is not it. The southern ground border is not it. It is not where most illegal immigration into this country happens. So let's get back to this video and see what other people have to say about what it would take to cost them Trump's vote.
What would Trump have to do to lose your vote?
Take my guns.
That's it.
That's it.
So there you have a single-issue voter. He cares about absolutely nothing, doesn't give a shit about health care, doesn't give a shit about whether or not he has a job, whether or not he has a home, whether or not the country is going down the toilet. As long as he gets to keep his guns, he'll vote for Trump.
Punching a woman right in the face on national TV.
So just so you know, Trump has been he's known for beating on women, just so you know. But apparently this woman doesn't know that.
Be a child molester?
Be a child molester. He's already been doing the pedo thing by using his access to the pageant that he used to own to spy on the underage girls in their dressing rooms by just walking in while they're naked.
Anything else?
That's about it.
Short of killing somebody, I don't know.
There's nothing he could do at all.
No.
Like murder somebody. Like.
Well, yeah, that would probably stop it right there.
What if he set the American flag on fire?
That's one of the freedoms that Donald Trump stands for.
I would bet you any amount of money that if you ask Donald Trump what he feels about flag burning, he would say it's a bad idea. In fact, let's Google that now. Hang on a second. Donald Trump flag burning. Trump tweets support for amendment banning flag burning. So, yes, this is another woman who is completely wrong and has no idea what Trump stands for, but is going to vote for him. Vist, the GOP have been running a very long plan to have citizens lose faith in the media. That's very true. It started with Roger Ailes in the 70s. You can watch whole documentaries about how he had the long plan, the decades-long plan for how to manipulate American confidence or lack thereof in the media and turn it into a propaganda machine that favors the right wing. All boomers. Maybe so, but not all of them. There were some younger people in this crowd so far.
What if a picture of Trump surfaced showing him smoking crack? Would you still vote for him?
Absolutely.
So this woman does not care if he smokes crack. Okay, let's see. What else?
What if he had a Hitler mustache?
What if he looked like Hitler?
Absolutely.
Still vote for him. Hello, Vist. Thank you for the follow. What else do we have here?
What if he said that Japan and South Korea could get nuclear weapons?
Absolutely.
Yep, so even if countries that historically hate us got nukes, she'd be okay with that and would still vote for him.
What if he stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shot somebody? Would you still vote for him?
Absolutely.
Even if he killed somebody in the middle of a major city, this woman would still vote for him. Even though Hillary would have been far better, it's fantastic that we got Trump and not a right-wing crackpot who knows what they're doing. The one saving grace about Trump is that he is so determined to do everything his own way that he forgets he has no political experience and doesn't know what he's actually doing. I actually think that Mike Pence would be a much more dangerous person to have as president than Trump. But the downside to this is Trump is basically setting the country up to become dictator of the United States. So, we're not really winning much here. How many liberals want Trump dead? None that I have met. Every liberal I know wants Trump out of office, but I do not know of any that actually want to see him executed. I don't know. Evader, I don't know. This is why I've said I cannot for the life of me fathom why these people are such big fans of Trump when it's so obviously against their own interest to vote for him. I mean, like, one of the things that Trump has done recently is cut funding for social programs like SNAP, which is what we commonly call food stamps. And the places that it hits the most are the states where almost everybody getting it is a Republican voter. He's literally fucking over the people that voted for him, and they still stay loyal to him. McConnell and Barr know exactly what they're doing. McConnell may well be the most dangerous man in American politics right now. Jail, honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Trump in jail for the criminal things he has done, like the way he defrauded all those people out of millions of dollars with a fake university. If he were not somebody who was rich and powerful, he'd be in prison for that. And I think that his crimes of that sort deserve to be, criminally prosecuted as they would be with anyone else. Let's see what else this video shows.
Even if he got a tattoo on his forehead that said, "Sit here, ladies."
Absolutely.
So this is a woman who thinks that if the President of the United States had a tattoo on his forehead that said, "Sit here, ladies," that's the kind of person you should vote for to represent the United States to the world. It's unbelievable.
What if he turned out to have a tattoo of a swastika on his shoulder?
He probably does.
And you would still vote for him?
I mean, I got friends that have swastikas on their arms, so, and they're cool.
What if he...
Swastikas, literally being a branded Nazi, would not stop that guy from voting. I happen to think that there are a lot of large organizations in this country that need to see the inside of an antitrust court. I'm sure you can, but you probably will not find a lot of liberal videos where people say that if their candidate was a legitimate Nazi, that they would vote for him or her. It's unlikely you're going to find that. It's unlikely you're going to find liberals who say if the candidate murdered people, that they would still vote for that person. You don't see a lot of that.
Punched the Pope in the face.
I'm a Catholic. Punch away.
If he punched the Pope, this Catholic woman says that that's fine.
That's what Jesus would want, I think, I guess.
Yeah, Trump has done a lot of unfortunate stuff. But again, with honor, you have to keep in mind, you say you're not like those people, but you buy into a lot of the stuff that they buy into, like the rhetoric about the wall. It legitimately will not do what you have been told it will do. There is no way Mexico is going to pay for it. It will not make any significant dent in the immigration situation in this country. It will cost an unbelievable amount of money just to build it. It will steal land from rightful landowners in order to get the space to make it. It will cost an insane amount of money to maintain over time. It's just, there is nothing good about that wall thing, but you're still a fan of it. You have apparently done no actual research into what the wall would or would not accomplish, what it will or will not cost, etc. You're just on board with it. And that's one of the things that I find challenging about Republican voters is that they usually don't have a clear understanding of whether or not the things they believe or the things they think about their candidate are even true. If he punched the Pope, you would vote for him. Nice. That's a little cruel, I think. I don't want anybody punching the Pope. You have a higher chance of being struck by lightning than Oklahoma has to vote Democratic in 2020. I wouldn't be surprised if that were true, Vist. I did, and she was just as wrong for having any semblance of interest in a wall as Trump is. It's a stupid policy no matter who suggests it. You know, I'm not a big fan of Hillary Clinton either. You know, she's been racist as shit during her time, you know, but if I had to choose between her and Trump, I would have picked her because she's not, I mean, oh God, the list of differences between them is just mind-bogglingly large. Yeah, and that's the thing. Hillary is basically a Republican, just a lot more moderate than Trump. She's not really a Democrat in anything but name. I happen to agree with you on that as well, Vist. The Democratic National Committee actually got caught out for taking funds that were donated to the Bernie campaign and routing it to the Clinton campaign. And I wish I were making this up. If you want to hear something horrible about the Democratic Party, they got taken to court over that. And the complaint against them was that they were so criminal that they were stealing money from one candidate and giving it to their preferred candidate. And their defense in court, and I wish I could say I were making this up, but you can do the research and find it in their own legal documents yourself. Their defense in court is to say, well, if you knew we were criminal, it's your fault for donating money. They're actually blaming the donors for their own criminal act. So the Democratic National Committee is no friggin' shining star of morality, okay? But they're not, in the back pocket of Putin. They're not collaborating with the leader of North Korea and talking about what a great guy he is, They didn't run a fake university and defraud many, many people out of millions of dollars in total. It's just the whole thing is kind of up the creek without a paddle at this point. But since we get stuck with these lesser of two evils situations, I am forced to pick Clinton over Trump because Trump is a nightmare and his running mate is arguably worse in a lot of ways. I mean, Vice President Pence has weird-ass religious convictions that make him unable to work with women because he thinks that he should never be alone in the presence of a woman without his wife there, which means that you literally cannot work with any female elected representative in a functional way. There's just so much shit wrong with him, too. Why do people still talk about Hillary as if she wasn't a piece of shit, too? Trump is the president, Hillary's on a book tour. Yeah, she's definitely got her issues. No Republican has legitimately won a presidential election since 1988, over 40 years. Reagan did win in a landslide, and he was an awful president, too. He broke the back of union labor in this country during the air traffic controllers strike. I'm sure there's been election tampering left and right. The electronic voting machines are so rife with ways that they are being manipulated and hacked and such that you can't trust any election result that comes out of an electronic voting machine. Reagan was not particularly good for America. He did accomplish one thing that was really useful, which is he essentially broke the back of the Soviet Union and put an end to the Cold War by doing so. But other than that, he didn't have a lot of useful stuff to his name. So I do want to give him credit where it's due that he was instrumental in putting an end to the Cold War. But other than that, not much good came out of that. Vista, that would not surprise me in the least. Everybody should know that password selection is not a strong suit of anybody who should be using passwords. People are just generally stupid about what passwords they pick. The first Bush was not great. The second Bush was not good either. He's the one who launched the war in Afghanistan, which we were talking about earlier. As soon as they were sued about it, they wiped the entire voting day. Because of course they would, because that's the appropriate response. Instead of updating the password, great. This is why I say we need to return to paper ballots, man. At least with paper ballots, you actually have to have an audit trail that can be followed and that isn't easily faked. But again, what do I know? I just want free and fair elections. Yeah, again, people are just stupid about choosing passwords. There's no question about that. None at all. We already saw that one. So this is an interesting one. This is from 2016, before Trump won the nomination. Actually, you know what? I'll hold off on another video because it seems like we got a good conversation going here. If Ohio went to Kerry, he would have won, and the Ohio SOS admitted he rigged the election so Bush would win. Yeah, if you want to see something really scary, you can find video of an interview where Bush from 2000 was talking with the CEO of Diebold, which is the company that makes most of the electronic voting machines in this country. And the CEO of Diebold literally says to him on camera that he was committed to handing Bush the victory in the 2000 election. Which, as far as I'm concerned, the minute those words came out of his mouth, it should have immediately disqualified any Diebold machine from ever being used in an election in this country again. I mean, how do you get away with that? But, the answer is you get away with that because the system is rigged to allow it, But it's staggeringly bad. Just really, really staggeringly bad. Having an yeah. This is one of the problem we have with the impeachment process at this point is that Trump is obviously, he's been impeached, he's committed the actions for which he was impeached, but the Republicans in the Senate have already committed to acquitting him regardless of what happens. You have McConnell saying he's going to organize the whole thing in concert with Trump's defense team, which again should immediately disqualify any Republican in the Senate from being allowed to sit on that trial if they're admitting that they're already planning to vote to acquit regardless of what the evidence says. That's hellacious. But the additional problem with that is if they do that, that sets a very dangerous precedent, which is that it means that no matter what Trump does, he cannot be held accountable for it, because his hand-picked leader of the Justice Department has said that no sitting president can be charged with anything, which means that you have to impeach somebody and get them convicted through a Senate trial, and it means that so long as the Senate is in the hands of the Republicans, Trump can literally declare himself dictator, and no legal action can be taken against him that will succeed. So this is literally setting the case for Trump to become the dictator. The president is not the problem. The problem is that the Senate is structurally gerrymandered towards racism. The president is still a problem. The Senate's problems definitely revolve around gerrymandering. There's no question of that. Yes, they have definitely packed the courts. And again, we're going to be seeing the negative effects of this for decades because of people like McConnell stealing a nomination from Obama and handing it to Trump. I mean, what you've got right now is you've got people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg hanging on for dear life, trying not to die in hopes that Trump will be voted out of office next time so that there's at least the chance that that seat will be filled by another Democrat. She literally can't let herself die or retire because the opportunity to balance the court has been stolen by McConnell and the Republican Party. Yeah, that's not going to happen with Honor CT. Unless she is physically incapable of getting to the court, she's not going to retire. Because again, you have to understand that by packing the court 6-3 or 7-2, what it basically means is the Republican Party can roll back every civil rights law. It can roll back women's right to control their own bodies. It can roll back women's right to vote. It can do anything, and there will be no way to stop it. Okay? Nothing can be done. And you say she's too damn old. I notice you're not saying anything about the age of any Republican justice sitting on the Supreme Court right now. So you need to be very cautious about how you address that with honor. Yes, Vist, you are absolutely correct. That it guarantees there will always be a partisan court. I am not sure that there is a better way to do it, because even if you have them elected by the public generally, they will still be appointed by politically slanted means. So I'm not sure what the answer to that problem is. By the way, I do not stream every night of the week. I used to, but when I started doing 2 streams, one for gaming and then this channel for news and politics, I couldn't do. I was started by streaming 6 nights a week, but I couldn't do 12 streams a week without losing my voice. If you're looking for another really interesting political streamer to follow, I recommend Bad Bunny. She is hilarious and very on point, and very willing to do all the research necessary to understand a new topic without assuming that things are right. But she has a very low bullshit tolerance, which she's very quick to hilariously stomp on stupidity. So if you're looking for something amusing to watch and you like political stuff, check out Bad Bunny. Actually, I don't know if I have the shout-out command working. Let me see if I can get that. I may not have that set up yet. Do I have it working yet? No. So this channel, I don't have all the weird commands set up yet. I do need to work on that. But look up Bad Bunny when we're done here. If she might actually be streaming tonight. I think she is. So if she's still around when I'm done, I will definitely raid her. The solution that used to be used in Poland was RCV with all candidates pre-approved by a law community. Yes, I know ranked choice voting is something we need in many aspects of American elections. Bad Bunny banned you. Honestly, you must have done something to piss her off, because she's not really that quick with the ban hammer. And I'm not sure how you ever get unbanned from her. But her channel legit is pretty friggin' funny. Especially when she goes on a tirade about being vegan, which is always funny, because she's like, I'm vegan, which is great. She has a lot of great points to make about the ethics of being vegan. But she presents it in a way that's really, number one, amusing, and a lot of the time very funny and informative at the same time. Yeah, and again, I do appreciate the people here being, decent to talk to tonight. We did have those 2 trolls show up that I had to ban because they started talking about hating people because of their religion and whatever else, and generally trying to be jerks. I ban that pretty much immediately when I see it. So, eventually, someday, dare to dream, someday I'll be a big enough streamer to actually have dedicated mods so I can, let somebody else handle swinging the ban hammer. But that brave and glorious day is not today. I am not that big of a channel at this point. So I do appreciate those who followed tonight. Evader, Vist, Simo. I don't know how to say your name properly, but hopefully that's close enough. So I do appreciate that. This is a new thing. I only actually started this channel when they created the politics section on Twitch. Because like I say, I've had a long career of doing stuff related to politics. From I think it was 2011 to 2013 or 14, I wrote, thank you for the follow. I wrote political op-ed for Yahoo News and had a blast doing that. I gotta say, the 2012 election season the articles almost wrote themselves because the Republicans had a lot of crazy people in that. They had a guy named Herman Cain who was like a pizza restaurant magnate, and he got caught with all these like underage hookers and stuff, and like you just when you're writing op-ed, it doesn't get much easier than, hey, let's talk about this guy and his, his underage hookers. Yeah, it was a hell of a ride working at Yahoo. I hold the distinction for being the first Yahoo op-ed contributor to write an article that's so controversial and generated so much backlash that it had to get pulled down from the site. I was the first one to write something that did that. I had been tasked with writing a series on religion in America at that time, and one of the organizations that I wanted to interview was the Catholic Church, so I reached out to the Archdiocese of New York, specifically to Cardinal Dolan's office, and wanted to interview him, and they were very excited about it until they found out I'm an atheist. Then all of a sudden they gave me the cold shoulder, right? But around that time it came out that Dolan was paying child molesting priests 20 grand a pop to disappear quietly before their crimes were discovered. So he was basically helping pedos hide from the law. And I wrote an article about that where I blasted him and the whole Catholic Church for this stuff. And basically I said the Catholic Church is dangerous, outdated, and should be disbanded, with the idea that if your organization has such a problem with child rape that you can't put a stop to it and that it's this widespread, that you need to shut down the organization and like reform it with better controls for this stuff. And the Catholics that saw the article got super pissed, and they complained so hard that the article got pulled down 93 minutes after it was posted, after getting 155,000 reads in that time. So yeah, Catholics did not like me. You can still actually find like pissed off Catholic websites that still have their angry web pages about that article if you were to search for it. Vistro says, the Republican majority in the Senate literally represents 20 million less votes than the Democratic minority, and that's simply absurd. Yes, that is the way gerrymandering has created it. If the United States actually had the districts set up to represent the public as they actually, exist, rather than gerrymandered to have districts be weird-ass shapes so that the politicians pick their voters instead of the voters picking the politicians, this country would basically be a liberal paradise for the past 50 years. It's just the Republicans have been so effective at twisting the system that they've been able to maintain a strong power base in this country. But if you actually get the opinions of the American public as a whole, it's something in the neighborhood of 2/3 to 70% vastly left-wing, and a very minority amount hardcore right-wing that just happens to have arranged things to have a really big voice. The Republicans are going to keep perpetual cold... Yeah, it's starting to seem that way. It is starting to seem that way. Honestly, I do think the United States is finished as a country. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take the tree to fall, because the Republicans have been so effective in destroying anything that represents or that resembles a functioning democratic republic that the country is doomed to be destroyed. I would hope, Vistro, I can dream, but it's unlikely. The rigging of the system is so strong that it's tough to imagine it's going to actually happen. Yeah, if the Senate remains controlled by the Republican Party, the country is shit out of luck. And that's the sad truth. Citizens United is a symptom. It definitely accelerated it, but it is not the sole cause of it. The Republicans have been building this strategy for decades. Again, you look up Roger Ailes and his strategy for the media. This is a long-term project on the part of the Republican Party. The Citizens United just allowed them to fund it a lot more strongly. By 2040, 30% of the country will represent 70% of the Senate. That's very possible. But I gotta say, one of the interesting things that's making the Republican Party bonkers is that Christianity is the fastest shrinking religion in this country, and Islam is the fastest growing. So it's estimated that by 2050, not only will white people be the decided minority in this country, but Christianity will be a minority to Islam here, which is just a real huge paradigm shift. Yes, they can, in fact, filibuster virtually anything. The thing is that the reason they can maintain that 30% is due to the complacency of a lot of people in this country. You know, the apathy. As you may be aware, in the last presidential election, roughly 100 million eligible voters stayed home and did not show up at the ballot. Okay? And you can rig the system very strongly. We all know that. But Clinton actually won by 3 million popular votes. If she had won by 103 million, there would have been no way, for example, that the presidency would not have gone to the Democrat candidate. By the same token, if those 100 million people had not stayed home, if they had showed up at the ballots, it would have been a landslide for virtually every seat in the House and the Senate that were contested between the two parties. So, I mean, the biggest weapon they have in their arsenal, honestly, is apathy. I'm not really seeing anything at all that can be done unless we have a massive... Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, we need to beat the apathy that's been instilled in this country. There's a great documentary that you can watch on Netflix right now called The Great Hack. I don't know if anybody here has seen it. But it deals with how organizations like Cambridge Analytica have impacted politics around the world. And I think it was in Trinidad that there were two major parties, one of Indians and one of... who was the other group? Like native African American types. I think that was how it broke down. But basically what they needed was to promote apathy, and they used their control of, you know, and ability to analyze data and the availability of it on all these people who were, you know, in that country, and literally created a movement among young people where they were convinced they were sticking it to the man by staying home and not voting. You know? They literally had these like giant rallies and such where they were making big X's with their forearms saying we're not going to vote. And because of that, the opposition party won in a landslide because all these people had been convinced that the best way to support their cause was to not support their cause. It's crazy. Yeah, I think what we're going to see this time around to guarantee a Trump win is Tulsi Gabbard running as a third-party candidate. She basically fucked herself out of any chance of winning the Democratic nomination when the vote happened for impeachment and she just stood up and said present instead of casting a vote for the impeachment. She basically showed that she is not on the side of the Democratic movement, which is not surprising. She comes from a family of Republicans, and the only reason that she ran as a Democrat was because she was running in Hawaii, which is an overwhelmingly Democrat state. But she's basically a Republican in disguise, and I think she plans to run third party just to be a spoiler. Biden having the nomination would be a train wreck, yes. The only way the Democrats are likely to win in 2020 is if somebody like Sanders or Warren is the candidate. They need somebody who is so starkly different from not just Trump, but from the establishment, that it will energize the Democrat voter base to turn out in numbers we've never seen before. And Biden is just not that guy. He just isn't. With honor, I certainly hope you're wrong, because if that happens, it's going to be a Trump win by default, because nobody likes Biden enough to show up in the numbers that it would take to have it be an actual contest. But the Democratic Party seems to be pushing him the same way they pushed Hillary last time, so... Who knows? Warren is electable. I don't necessarily agree with her opinions, but she has support. Yes, she does. I'm more of a Bernie fan myself. Bernie has a 50-year record of doing exactly what he said he was going to do and standing by his principles, and that's something you just don't find anywhere else in American politics. This is a good discussion, by the way. Thank you guys for participating. Actually, I should say thank you, people. I don't know which among you are guys and gals and whatever else, so pardon me if I am not correct in that. I have no idea who's actually showing up here today. Media have been ramping up expectations for Bernie. If he wins Iowa, it could be the bare minimum versus... Yeah, exactly. If you take a look at the way the media covers Bernie, they always downplay whatever he's doing, and they tend to turn up the volume on anything about Biden. Which is just crackers. You know, if you take a look at any venue that Bernie shows up in, like, the place is always packed to the walls. I voted Bernie in primary. When he supported Hillary, I chose Trump. Here's the thing. The reason Bernie supported Hillary is not because he thought she was the best candidate that ever lived. It's because he thought Trump was such a horrible option that he had no choice but to throw in his support with the candidate running against him. And that goes back to the problem we have in this country because we don't have anything like ranked choice, etc., where it's always a lesser of two evils contest. You know? You never see two shining stars of ethical, moral leadership running against each other in the United States. It's always, you know, somebody who's decidedly worse than somebody else, so you pick the person who's not as bad. If you choose Trump, you're voting in favor of the destruction of this country. That is unfortunately accurate. Trump is... He has no political experience. He does not understand policy. He does not understand economics. He is one of the worst businessmen to ever try to engage in business in the United States. I'm not sure where you're getting the idea that Bernie hates women. I'm interested in knowing why you say he makes your skin crawl, though. Dems could only begin to fix the system if they win supermajorities in 2020, and we all know it's not likely that happens. I agree. The thing is that Trump is... I mean, he basically is the textbook example of narcissistic personality disorder. He's dangerous for the same reason Hitler was dangerous, which is that he's convinced he is the only one who should be in charge. He sees himself as a messiah. And he's got the backing to push it through if he tries hard enough. If we had Pence, the entire system could easily collapse in 2 years. I agree with that. NBC said that. NBC said Bernie makes your skin crawl and hates women. Interesting. I'm not sure what justification they have for saying that, but okay. NBC is allowed to have whatever opinion it wants. If you could find the article, I'd be very interested in finding out who that was. Poland had a similar situation with the right wing coming into power and ruining everything. Yeah, so one of the things about the right wing that's so dangerous is that, as Vistero has said, is that they're authoritarian, but also that they are economically plutocrats. They want the rich to rule everything. And that is bad for everybody else. The only difference is they managed to collapse the entire left simultaneously. Don't think that can't happen here, because it probably can. I hate to say it, but it probably can happen here. I wouldn't like to see it, but I can't guarantee it's not going to happen. You know, they've been very effective at destroying anything like common sense in politics. So who knows what they'll manage. Yikes. That's a scary thought. Well, I mean, that's what happens when you have a rigged system, you know? I'm not really familiar with Hungarian politics. I would have to do some research on that to get a feel for the subject matter. Google judicial system is no longer independent. Oh, sorry. Google Bernie makes my skin crawl and it pops up. Okay. Sorry, just things scrolled and I mixed two messages up there. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so that's some op-ed person who doesn't really matter. You know, it's an NBC bit of propaganda, is what it boils down to. Makes your skin crawl. Yeah, but still have a detail on the plans. Elizabeth Warren is only sounds pretty Sanders. It's not. See, that's just frankly dishonest. Sanders is very forthright about how he'll accomplish everything. Yeah, see, you can't even identify what exactly it is, but I see him as sort of a not pro-woman candidate, which is ridiculous. The guy's been a civil rights and equal rights activist since the 1960s. You know, it's tough to, it's tough to take that seriously. So, yeah. Whatevs. Yeah, religion is dangerous because it has beliefs that require and admit of no explanation. And that is definitely a bad thing. The EU can't even take any action on them because Poland just vetoes it. Pff, of course. Yeah. It's dangerous and horrifying. Yeah. Ermagerd, yeah. That's one of the challenges with having that broad veto power. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be criminal in a country, you have to make sure the judicial system is not going to stop you. You know, you either need to destroy it or control it. That's just, evil overlord 101. It took 12 members to vote down a bill allowing execute. Yeah, see, and this is a problem. Is that a lot of people use their authoritarian power to enforce bigotry and hatred, and what they tell themselves is they're enforcing, God's morality. Which is a laughable thing because every religion in the world has a different idea of what God's morality is. Yikes. Just yikes. So I have to think about whether or not I'm going to do a stream on New Year's. I normally do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I hadn't been planning on streaming tomorrow, but some folks have said I should consider it. I'm not even sure what I would do. I'm concerned that if I do a New Year's Eve stream that, my viewers will all be out drinking or something, and I'll just be talking to thin air. But I'll give some consideration to that. You'd be here most likely? Well, maybe I will do one. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. New Year's Eve is the only night of the year that I intentionally consume alcohol. My wife and I make ourselves a giant cocktail and split it. So I might be a little wasted. In which case I would not stream. If I can't control myself, I won't stream. I wouldn't say all major wars started because of religion, but I would say there have been plenty of them that have. You know, religion is not the only justification people have used historically for war. But it definitely has been a major contributor throughout all of human history. Oh, let me see. There's something. This is kind of a funny thing if I can find it. Let me see if I can find this one thing. No, where is it? This one. Okay.
People got along just fine for thousands of years without AA. Just like they got along for thousands of years without religion.
I like you and have no reason not to.
I like you and have no reason not to.
Hey, did you hear about that magic baby that was born in Bethlehem?
That always cracks me up. Oh, man. Family Guy totally nailed that one. Yeah, people tell me I should use Chrome so that I can use that plugin that does text-to-speech so that the stream will be accessible to the hearing impaired. You know, they could see the text pop up on stream. But I'm so used to Firefox, I haven't gotten around to checking out the other browser. Plus, I want to buck the trend, Who wants to be just another Chrome guy? Yeah. I did a show recently where I picked apart a video from a hardcore Christian apologist who just said some really stupid shit. And, boy, did it piss off one or two religious people who were watching the video at that time. If you like Bernie, do you watch Jimmy Dory on YouTube? He seems honest. I don't. But now that I have a name that seems worth checking out, I can take a look. I mean, not tonight. I will probably look at it in some downtime and see what it is. But I'm not familiar with that person. Within reason, if you post something that's obviously in poor taste or pornographic or whatever, then I will shut links off. I did have a guy show up on my other channel one time, literally trying to get my channel banned by posting stuff that was racist, and the username for that account was literally closed channel. So on the other channel, I don't allow any links at all. I am hoping that people will be a little less idiotic here. But, there's no guarantees, so we'll see. If I do have to put an end to links, then the auto mod might actually block them. I don't know yet. Opinion polling for the 2022 Hungarian parliamentary election. Okay. What games do I stream? Primarily War Thunder. I normally do tank battles in that game. But I have been known to stream other stuff. Sometimes I like to find, sort of hidden gem indie games on Steam. So I play a lot of different stuff. That's scary, yeah. Ooh, hiccup. Yeah, honestly, the world is going to hell in a handbasket, so to speak. So I don't know where you guys are from, but I'm from the northeastern United States, and we just got dumped on with this ice, like sleet and ice storm over the last 36 hours, and we actually had a thunder snow today, which is a very rare occurrence where you have a snowstorm with actual thunder. It scared the heck out of my dog. The poor girl just can't deal with thunder. She gets terrified and goes on this rampage around the house where she tries to dig a hole in the carpet, scratching and scratching and scratching. So I hope none of you are coping with that, because it made the roads very treacherous and it's just very weird weather. Okay. Oh, man. So, yeah. Connecticut, but yeah, it was so loud. Yeah, so you heard it too, huh? Yeah, it's bad. The roads were awful, just awful. Took my wife a ton longer than usual to get home today. Which I was glad she got home safely though. So, what time is it? It's almost 11:30 here. I will probably think about winding down for the night here. New Hampshire. So, yeah, I'm going to think about winding down for the evening and wrapping up because I've covered all the real major topics I wanted to cover tonight. Was interesting. I've been doing this ongoing test where I put up some kind of attention-grabbing giant text banner at the top of the screen to see if it drags in attention. I put something in the stream title and I put something on the stream screen. And it seems like almost nobody cares about the stream title, but they definitely care about giant banners that show up in the thumbnail when they look in the politics section. So I will have to start using that as a normal thing where I keep a banner up there to discuss what's going on or, advertise or whatever. Because it seems much more effective than the stream title. Especially since I try to title my streams with the date so that when I export stuff to YouTube, it shows up with the correct chronological information in the video title. Eventually, I hope to get enough followers on YouTube that I can get the YouTube channel name changed to say Barebones Talk instead of just that giant string of letters and numbers. Welcome back, Vistro. I was just saying I'm thinking I'll probably start wrapping up for the night because I've already dealt with most of the stuff. That I wanted to talk about today. Facecam will get you more. Yeah, it might, but again, I kind of like the way this goes with the channel theme. Plus, having heard enough, death threats from when I used to write political stuff, I kind of wanted to keep my face off camera for this channel, just because, it just seems like a wiser call. But eventually I might switch over to using my actual face. The voice telling... And there we go. Silence! Yeah, so... Yep, another troll. Just so that you know, Mr. Troll, if you had bothered to stop in and be polite, I would have been glad to explain to you that the reason that banner is up there is I'm doing some marketing testing trying to find out if, giant banners in the thumbnail draw more attention than the stream title. So, I'm not actually as inflammatory as that. It just needs to be something attention-getting, and I'm just doing it for market research. But since you decided you had to show up and be kind of a jerk, you get the 10-minute timeout, and I'll probably just ban you. Because, you were kind of a twit. So, yeah, let's just ban you. And... Want. There. So now you're banned. Hello, Lollipoposaurus. You are showing up just in time for me to be winding down the stream. I mean, barring something like, because I put something addressed to Bad Bunny in the stream title, unless, she raids me with 200 people in the next 5 minutes, I'm probably going to be wrapping up for the night. Yeah, you definitely have the timing award for the evening. We've had 3 trolls so far that had to get banned. Oh, you've been here for a bit. Just stick to mostly lurking. Well, you're always welcome, and I'm always glad to hear you speak up, Lollipop. You were called a Nazi and a Russian bot. Well, das Vidanya, if you're actually Russian, I've been called a lot of ethnic slurs from when I used to live in Kentucky. I have never lived in the south of the United States, but I have heard it can be a challenge. So, Lollipop, any of you, actually, any good plans for New Year's Eve? Anything fun? Parties, booze, dancing, anything? It's generally terrible. No plans for Vistro. Okay. Well, considering how many crazy people get on the roads on New Year's Eve, maybe it's better to stay home. Hello, Moist. How are you doing? We have been going over a bunch of stuff today. You're kind of showing up toward the tail end of the show, but you are absolutely welcome. Say hi. No, you're a hermit in the winter. I do not blame you at all. I do not blame you at all. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to stay home and do your own thing. Yeah, tonight we have already talked about done a news wrap up on all the big stuff from the Associated Press. We talked quite a bit about gun control because of the shooting and the guard at the Texas church service who put an end to it, which is really pretty impressive. And thank you for the follow. That led to a discussion about what is or is not a reasonable way to deal with the gun violence crisis we have in this country. And it was pretty good. We had some people from both sides of the fence talking, which I love having that happen. Then we talked a bit about some kind of bonkers Trump voters. With Honor says that he is not like those people, for which I am very grateful, because some of the people we looked at tonight were absolutely cuckoo. Like to the point where they should be popping out of a clock at midnight. So yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Was there any subject that you were interested in tonight, Moist? It can definitely be iffy if you get out of Louisville at all. You're making me very glad that I live in the northern half of the country. Just restrict guns. Why is it so hard? The answer to that is the American gun culture is so ingrained in the public that it's something that is very difficult to accomplish. It's something that may not even be 100% appropriate. I mean, there are some legitimate reasons to own a firearm. Some people have a tradition of hunting. Some people like to target shoot. Some people have a legitimate need to carry them for personal defense. My concern comes from the lack of universal background checks and the lack of requirements to do things like store them safely. I think those should be, kind of obvious steps we could take, but those are options that people tend to really push back against. That's when I got here, for the lady who loves Trump even if she punches the Pope. Yeah, I mean, that would just... Isn't that insane, Lollipop? You're like, would you stop voting for Trump if he punched the Pope? And she goes, no, I'm Catholic. Punch away. Like, seriously? Let's see. Not having UBCs is simply idiotic. I don't know how well UBCs can be implemented. I mean, in principle, I like the idea, but I'm not 100% sure how to put it into practice in a way that isn't going to have negative side effects, Isn't the Pope a creepy bastard? Well, I mean, the Catholic Church has not done nearly enough to put an end to its child rape issue, so I'm inclined to think of anybody in a leadership position in the Catholic Church as being kind of creepy just based on that alone. It should be so patently obvious that if you have a problem with kids getting raped in your organization, that ought to be a really high priority item to address, and to address it decisively and without protecting the perpetrators. Smelting babies for stem cells, I'd reconsider. Yeah, I agree. Now that's interesting, Vistro. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not sure that UBCs are definitely the reason for that. I would say on a broader scale that it sounds like any reduction in poverty is going to tend to have an impact on, by reducing violent crime. I think poverty is a big motivator for crime, because when you're desperate, you do desperate things. It sort of goes with the territory, Desperation is a horrible, horrible motivator. It brings out the worst in everybody. Oh, man. So, Moist agrees, yeah. It spiked after the Soviet collapse and Polish independence and almost immediately fell back down. That doesn't surprise me. Political uncertainty is one of those things that causes a lot of upheaval. So, Poland is a small country compared to the U.S. Yes, but that doesn't mean it's unimportant. You know what I mean? One thing to watch out for as an American is that culturally, Americans tend to think the United States is sort of the center of the universe and the most important in all things at all times, and that simply is not the case. We need to keep in mind that other countries are their own independent nations that have their own, public and their own governments and their own, qualities and problems, and they're all every bit as valid as those that affect the United States. Just because the other nation might be geographically far away or have a smaller population or whatever, doesn't invalidate it as a country. In fact, I would say that's one of the things about Americans that drives the rest of the world nuts, is we tend to be dismissive of other countries. And that's something that American people as a whole need to work on. Not being dismissive of everybody else. It's time to put away the giant foam finger that says we're number one and start realizing we're just part of the world, not the entirety of it, if you see what I mean. We may play a fairly important role in certain ways, but that doesn't make America the king of the world. And now I have a visual in my head of that scene from Titanic with, Jack holding Rose up. I'm the king of the world, Polish sounds like Russian to Americans, but the languages are really far apart. In my gaming channel, I had a guy that showed up a lot for maybe a year who was from Poland, and he used to always be very proud of the fact that he said, that when you're really pissed off, Polish is a language that sounds really good when you're really mad. He was very proud of that. We had a whole debate on that. I said Japanese is a great language for use when you're pissed. I don't speak either one of them, but based on hearing them, they both sound pretty good. They're great rage languages. Oh, man. I'm not sure how we got onto the subject of languages, but this conversation has gone in a lot of fun directions tonight, so thank you all for that. There are so many ways to insult people. Somebody ought to come up with a ranking of languages based on how many ways there are to insult people in that language. Excuse my French. I'm sorry, but French just doesn't sound angry enough. It's the angriest Frenchman in the world does not sound all that scary. You know what I mean? Swedish is the worst range language. So, as far as most Americans are concerned, Swedish sounds like the language the Muppet guy parodies, the chef from the Muppets. We don't know what Swedish sounds like as a general rule. A lot of bork, bork, bork is how Americans perceive Swedish. Oh, man. Oh, you guys are cracking me up. I don't know how we got here, but this is awesome. I feel offended now. Greenlandic. Is that actually a language? I didn't know that was a language. Or are you just kind of pulling my chain? Really? Okay. That's pretty wild. I wonder if anybody's cataloged how many actively spoken languages there are in the world right now. From really tiny tribal languages on up to the major ones like Spanish and English and Chinese and Russian and things like that. 198, is that true, or are you just kind of making that number up? Because I would imagine there are probably more than that if you were talking about, minor languages too. Wild. That's a lot of languages. This is why we need that, Star Trek Universal Translator. Because there's no way any one person could learn to speak it all. It's just not possible to do that. Oh, man. when I think about the United States, we have so many regional accents in this country that sometimes people from one part of the country, kind of sounded like they're from entirely different nations than people from other part. Interesting. I did not know that. I'm not sure how you would even figure that out or how it could ever be enforced. I would imagine it never will be either. It's too necessary for the conducting of business and commerce and, everything transactional. How will people buy cheese if you can't spend money there? I know some other strange laws in Vatican City. It's illegal to die. Well, I mean, they do claim that people can come back from the dead, so, Moistmaster, probably the same way everything else became a law, by somebody thinking it was a good idea at the time and saying, everybody vote. Oh. Man, I'm hungry. I think I'm going to get a snack soon. What do you think, guys? How does a snack sound to all you guys and gals? I need to start thinking about gender-neutral language to use while on stream because, particularly on the internet, you run into people of every imaginable sort, and I don't want to exclude people. What do you collect examples of bizarre laws? You just have like something for everywhere. That's kind of awesome. See if anything new. Wow, they're really hammering that church shooting thing. What the hell? Come on. Unreal. Is everybody seeing this headline? Isn't it though? The hell? Unbelievable. Blech. That is somebody who has suffered years and years of emotional pain. That's just bonkers, man. The person ended up going to prison for 25 years, though, so at least there's that. Oh, man. And people wonder why I say these institutions are corrupt and horrifying. Oof. I should do a whole show about stuff like this. Yeah, I know, only 25. When you think about it, that's probably like 4 days per incident of assault. Like, what the hell? Yeah, I know, right? Why not? Yeah, we've had a lot of 8-year presidents in the past couple decades. Blech. Alright, I'm just not focusing on that anymore. That's just horrible. That's just horrible. Well, I mean, I'll be hoping for whoever's running against Trump to win. I will certainly be casting my vote against Trump simply because I'm so terrified of what the future of this nation will look like if he continues in that office. But so, with honor, when you say something like that here, I'm always going to point out that if you're going to make a claim like that, you should probably have some kind of evidence to back it up. Because that's one of those really broad statements that starts to run close to conspiracy theory territory. I mean, we know that there are trafficking industries around the world, but when you say things like global elites, it starts to take on kind of an air of, are we really serious here? But again, you're not actually providing any citation for it, you're just saying it at this point. You know, I would need to see some kind of documentation on that. If he's reelected, the U.S. is literally finished. I happen to agree. But, you know, it's interesting. In one of my prior shows, I talked about that eventuality by referencing the Reverend Niemöller quote, which is the one you've probably heard about. It says, first they came for the Jews, but I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionist, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. And it goes on like that a few times and says, and finally they came for me, but there was no one left to speak for me. And what a lot of Republicans in this country don't seem to understand, if they're motivated by the whole, let's get rid of the Muslims, let's get rid of the gays, let's get rid of the immigrants, let's get rid of the whatever, that if your party gains its support by talking about who they will destroy on your behalf, who they will get rid of on your behalf, that once they get rid of all those people, if their whole thing is who they will get rid of, they have to start dividing up their own supporters and destroying them too, because that's the only thing they have. You know, when Republicans vote for somebody like Trump, who's, like, let's ban Muslims from traveling here and let's build walls and whatever else, that it's only a matter of time until the guns are turned on his own supporters. They are literally creating their own destruction. It's just that they'll watch other people they dislike get destroyed first, but then it's all going to turn on them because there's nowhere else for it to turn. Yeah, the single issue voters really are kind of creating their own future problems. Trump may die before then, but the system that he is helping reinforce will not. Eat the rich. Honestly, I really do believe that the United States would be better off if it were a little more like France, where when the government does anything wrong, the whole country immediately goes marching on the Capitol, demanding that they fix it. In France, the politicians know that they are there at the whim of the public, that the public has the power. In the United States, the public basically has no power anymore. Every time a politician does horrible things, and then, like with what's going on with Trump, where the agency that is supposed to monitor him and convict him of the crimes he has committed, the Senate, has said that they won't do it, it says to the American people that the people in power are not accountable to anybody anymore, least of all the American public. And isn't that the truth, Vistro? They've a lot of them have died, but the institutions and situations they have created have been enormously harmful. That's what I'm saying. You know, the French actually have reminded their politicians that the people are the ones in charge. And in the United States, we don't do that. We've stopped doing it. You know, I wholeheartedly believe we'd be better off if the American public were more engaged in its own well-being. Okay, so it's almost midnight here. You folks have kept me yakking for about half an hour longer than I thought I was going to, which is awesome, so thank you for that. But I am going to wrap up here and kind of wind down because I'm starting to get a little raspy in the throat. But I will be back again on Wednesday. It's 5:52 a.m. here. Sleep, get some rest. Why are you awake at 5:52 in the morning? I love that you're here, but I'm not that important, you know. You folks are awesome though. You've been wonderful tonight, so thank you very much. And I do appreciate all this amazing participation. You folks are great to talk to. You know, I'm just very grateful for all of you who came by. So I am going to wrap up again. Thank you so much. I'll be back again Wednesday around 9 p.m. New York time, and I hope to see some of you guys and gals come back, and we'll thank you with honor. We'll talk more then. I'll try and find some interesting stuff to find. We'll do our normal news wrap up, and then pick a new topic to dig into. So y'all have a good night and a happy New Year.